I noticed that one of my videos had announced 1 million views, which is crazy.
In just 11 weeks, everything flipped. From pure love to police reports, warnings, and questions no one saw coming. The man she trusted may not have been who he claimed to be. So, was this love, or something far more dangerous? Because the truth behind what Rain walked into is only just beginning to come out. The girl behind the Wolfpack story. Rain Brown was born on November 23, 2002, in Hoona, Alaska, into a life that already felt different from the start. Her parents, Billy and Amora Ami Brown, gave her a name that stood out immediately: Merry Christmas, Catherine Raindrop Brown. It was not something you could ignore, and in many ways, it set the tone for everything that followed. She was the 7th and youngest child, the final piece of what the family proudly called the Wolf Pack. Her early life unfolded far from anything most people would recognize as normal. The family lived together in a single-room cabin on Chichagof Island in southeast Alaska. All 9 of them shared that tight space, building a world that felt closed off, almost separate from everything else. Over time, that isolation shaped more than just their lifestyle. Even Discovery would later say the family developed their own accent and way of speaking, something that came from years of living within their own environment. That unusual, almost sealed-off world became the foundation of Rain's story long before cameras ever arrived. Then everything changed when television found them. On May 6, 2014, Alaskan Bush People premiered on the Discovery Channel, and suddenly that private world was no longer hidden. Rain was only 11 years old at the time. On screen, she appeared small, soft, and almost fragile compared to the wilderness around her. She wore braids, hand-me-down fleece jackets, and carried herself with a quiet presence that made her seem younger than her age. She spent time playing with dolls, caring for chickens, and singing, showing a side that felt gentle and unguarded. Fans quickly noticed something about her. They started calling her Bush Barbie. It was not meant as an insult. It came from the way she seemed drawn to pink, to style, to small, bright details that stood out against the rough setting. That contrast mattered more than it seemed. While the show presented a story of a wild, isolated upbringing, Rain often came across as something else entirely. Beneath the setting, beneath the narrative built around her, she felt like a regular American girl trying to exist inside an unusual life. That contrast stayed with her as the show grew, and the show did grow fast. Alaskan Bush People became a major success, running for 14 seasons and reportedly helping build a family fortune of around $60 million. Billy Brown himself was estimated to be worth $6 million before his death. The children, including Rain, were reported to earn between $40,000 and $60,000 per season, with episode payments ranging from $8,000 to $15,000. Over time, as Rain grew into her early 20s, estimates placed her personal net worth somewhere between $200,000 and $500,000. From the outside, it looked like everything had worked perfectly. A remote family had turned their life into fame, into money, into a full reality TV empire. But that version of the story did not hold for long. Another version began pushing its way forward. Just 5 months after the show first aired, on October 3, 2014, everything shifted. A Juneau grand jury indicted the Brown family on 60 counts of first-degree, unsworn falsification and theft. Prosecutors claimed the family had misrepresented their residency between 2010 and 2013 in order to collect permanent fund dividend payments, money reserved for full-time Alaska residents. Court records showed Billy Brown had actually left Alaska in October 2009 and did not return until August 2012. The family had also spent time living in Texas during 2011. Rain was too young to be charged, but that did not mean she was untouched by it. The situation stayed in the background, shaping everything quietly. On November 18, 2015, Billy and his son Joshua accepted a plea deal. Then, in January 2016, sentencing followed. Billy was ordered to repay $7,956 and pay a $10,000 fine. Joshua had to repay $1,174 and pay a $2,000 fine. Both were given 180 days in jail, with 150 days suspended, meaning they served 30 days each. They also had to complete 40 hours of community service, work that could not be filmed for the show. The the judge did not treat it lightly. "This is a theft from every Alaskan. It harms everybody in the state." Billy responded in court with a promise. "I can assure you that you will never see me in any judicial system whatsoever as long as I live." Rain was 13 when she heard that, and years later, her own path would lead her back into a courtroom. But even before that moment, the cracks were already forming. And some of those cracks showed up in her life directly. In the summer and fall of 2017, Omi Brown was diagnosed with late-stage lung cancer. The family left everything behind and relocated to a rented $2.7 million home in Beverly Hills so she could receive treatment. The show documented the situation, and the image of the family shifted. It was no longer just survival and independence. It became fear, uncertainty, and the reality of losing someone important. Rain was 14 at the time, and during that period, something else surfaced. She began speaking openly about depression. On Instagram, under the name @Hiruf Kirkwell, she shared posts that felt raw and unfiltered. One post from October 2017 spread widely among fans. In it, she described feeling broken, empty, unable to get out of bed for days. She wrote about not understanding why she felt that way, about losing motivation, about feeling like nothing more than a shell of herself. For many people, that honesty brought sympathy, but it also brought something else: criticism, cruelty. Online trolls began questioning everything. They questioned whether she was truly depressed. They questioned whether Amy's illness was even real. Some even questioned the entire foundation of the family's story. The comments became relentless. It reached a point where her older brother Noah stepped in publicly. In December 2017, he defended her on Facebook, pushing back against the accusations and the hate. Reports at the time said Rain was receiving insulting and harmful comments almost every day. Noah made it clear that more people cared about her than those trying to tear her down. But words like that do not erase what was already felt. And by then, the image people had seen on television had already started to shift. The girl with braids, the soft voice, the Bush Barbie identity. It was all still there, but behind it, something heavier had begun to show. When everything started falling apart, Amai survived. In 2018, she was declared cancer-free, and for a moment, it felt almost unreal after how serious her condition had been. It looked like the family had finally made it through the worst. There was relief, there was hope, but that feeling did not last. Instead, one crisis quietly led into another, and the Brown family homestead, now set in Okanogan County, Washington, became the background for something very different. In August 2020, another major blow hit. A massive wildfire tore through the family's property on Palmer Mountain. The damage was severe. Bear Brown later shared that their home had been destroyed. The fire burned across more than 18,000 acres in the region, leaving destruction everywhere it moved. The family rebuilt. They raised new structures, new barns, and new ranch spaces. From the outside, it looked like recovery, but something had already changed. You can rebuild buildings, but you cannot rebuild the same feeling. The sense of continuity was gone. The life they once had was already shaken, and even this new version began to feel uncertain, fragile. By that time, Rain was 17, and she was changing too. The difference showed more with every passing month. She started bleaching her dark brown hair blonde. She wore pink lipstick more often. Her social media began showing a more styled version of herself, something more deliberate. The old Bush Barbie nickname no longer felt like a small detail. It felt real. The distance between who she was becoming and the barefoot girl people had seen on television kept growing. Then, everything shifted again. Her father died, and after that, nothing felt steady. Billy Brown's health had been failing publicly for years. Back in 2016, his attorney told a judge in Alaska that Billy was suffering around 3 seizures a week. There were heart problems. There were liver issues. The show itself captured moments where he had to be rushed to hospitals. He had even been warned that living at higher elevation in the Washington mountains was dangerous for his heart. Still, he stayed. On February 7, 2021, Billy Brown died at the age of 68. Reports said his death happened while filming Alaskan Bush People. A production crew was inside the home. Bear Brown alerted them that something was wrong. A crew member called 911. Deputies and EMTs arrived, but it was already too late. The reported cause involved coronary artery disease, congestive heart failure, and likely cardiac arrest triggered by a seizure. Amai lost the man she had been married to for more than 40 years. The children lost their father, and Rain was only 18. For someone who had been on television for years, many expected Billy to leave behind a large fortune. But the reality was different. His estate was valued at just over $410,000. Most of that came from 4 pieces of real estate seen on the show, along with livestock and household items. He had no will. Ami was approved by the court to handle everything. There were also nearly $30,000 in unpaid medical bills. Then, only 2 months after his death, another problem appeared. In April 2021, a man named Robert Mahon filed a lawsuit against Billy Brown's estate and the production company, Alaskan Wilderness Family Productions. He claimed that back in January 2009, he had made a deal with Billy. According to him, he gave $20,000 in exchange for 10% of the gross income from production work over a 10-year period. He said he never received payment. He estimated Billy had earned around $500,000 per episode, and across more than 100 episodes and 14 seasons, the numbers sounded enormous. But there was another side to that story. At the time he filed the lawsuit, Robert Morgan was in federal prison. In 2019, he had pleaded guilty to healthcare fraud. Prosecutors said he had stolen $3.5 million, fabricated records, and continued deceiving people for years. He was sentenced to 63 months in prison and gave up his medical license to avoid further charges. So, the person demanding money from Ami, who had just lost her husband, was himself a convicted con artist. The case moved slowly, and reports suggested it remained unresolved. But while that legal fight played out in public, something more serious was happening inside the family. Billy's death affected each of the 7 children differently. Some tried to stay strong, some focused on work, some stayed quiet. But no one seemed to fall harder or faster than Rain, when her mind became the battleground. In 2024, Rain posted a TikTok video that ran for nearly 10 minutes and spread quickly through the Alaskan Bush People Sunworld. It was not a casual update, it was something heavier. In that video, she explained what had happened to her in the years after her father died, and the phrase she kept repeating was psychotic break. She said the grief had completely overwhelmed her, that it felt like she had been pulled under by it, and that her mind reached a point where it simply could not handle it anymore. She described shutting down completely and mentally going somewhere else. It was not just emotional pain, it was disconnection. She forgot who she was. She forgot her own name. Even more than that, she believed she was someone entirely different. She described it as a very strange experience, something that did not feel real even while she was inside it. Eventually, she made a decision that changed everything. She checked herself into a clinic in Seattle for treatment, and during that time she received diagnoses she later shared publicly: bipolar I disorder, post-traumatic stress disorder, and generalized anxiety disorder. 3 diagnoses, all carried by the youngest child in the family. That alone reframed everything people thought they knew about her. She also revealed something that made her earlier years look different. What she had called depression when she was 14, during her mother's cancer treatment in Beverly Hills, had not simply been depression. It was, as she explained, the depressive side of an undiagnosed bipolar I disorder. The crashes, the days in bed, the sudden bursts of high energy and positivity that fans had watched on her social media for years. All of it now fit together in a way it never had before. That made her confession heavier. For years, she had presented herself as an inspirational voice and a mental health advocate. Now she was saying the story had always been deeper and more serious than almost anyone knew. In that same TikTok, she shared the National Crisis Line number and told viewers to call someone they loved, and if they could not, to call the crisis line instead. She admitted she had been nervous to talk about her diagnosis at all. She also said that one of her personal icons had gone through something similar, and knowing that story helped her feel less alone. She did not name the icon. She did not name the Seattle clinic, but she said enough to make one thing clear. In the years after Billy Brown's death, the youngest member of the Wolfpack had gone through a full psychiatric crisis, needed inpatient treatment, and come out with new medication and a completely different understanding of herself. What she did not know when she filmed that video was how much darker things were about to get. By the months leading up to her April 2025 arrest, The Brown family was already breaking apart in several directions at once. In April 2025, Bear and his wife Raven announced their separation after having 3 sons together. Earlier that same year, in January 2025, Noah and his wife Rain had already announced their own separation. And in that same month, Rain shared that she had married Josiah Lorton. At the same time, Matt, the oldest sibling, had already been distant from the family for years after multiple stays in alcohol rehab. He first entered inpatient treatment in 2016, relapsed in 2018, and completed another 30-day program before leaving the show and largely cutting ties. Bam Bam's path had also shifted earlier after he was involved in a fatal car crash on a Washington highway in September 2019. The records show he faced no charges, and after that he stepped back into a quieter life focused on photography and the ranch. And then there was Rain and Noah. Once he had defended her publicly when she was just a teenager being attacked online. By 2024, they were no longer even speaking. Reports supported by court documents showed that Noah Brown and his wife Rain filed for a temporary restraining order against Rain in 2024. In that filing, Noah accused her of stalking, threatening violence, and using drugs. He claimed she had threatened his life in July 2022, while cameras were filming an episode of Alaskan Bush People. He also alleged that she was using cocaine, meth, and alcohol. Another claim pointed to an incident in December 2023, where he said Rain had offered their mother cocaine for a migraine or headache. The court denied the request, not based on whether the claims were true or false, but because the filing did not include enough information and was not properly supported by a declaration. It also noted that Noah had used the wrong name on the paperwork and failed to submit it correctly. The request to keep Rain 1,000 feet away from Noah, Rain, and their children was rejected. Rain responded in her own way. On social media, she posted that she did not give a flying fuck what anyone thought of her. She did not directly respond to the accusations, but the message was clear. Whatever bond had once existed between her and Noah was gone. The wolf pack was no longer a pack. It had broken apart. And then came the welfare check that pushed everything closer to the edge. The arrest that changed everything. On April 8th, 2025, just 3 days before Rain was arrested, something happened that pushed the situation beyond quiet family conflict. Noah called the Okanogan County Sheriff's Department and asked for a welfare check on their mother, Amy Brown. That call, which might have seemed routine at first, later became a key part of the story once details appeared in probable cause documents. According to those records, Noah told authorities that Amai was moving between places, staying with Rain and Rain's boyfriend, Josiah Lorton, at a cabin in Liar's Cove. He said he had tried reaching his mother after receiving a message from her that did not make sense to him. He described it as disjointed, something that raised concern immediately. He also claimed he had heard she had been drinking heavily and using meth, which he believed had been given to her by Rain and Josiah. The concerns went further. Noah said Amy was not being allowed to take her normal medication. He also described Rain as someone who struggled to stay consistent with her own treatment, saying she believed that anyone trying to make her take medication was the devil. He warned deputies about Josiah as well, describing him as someone who was always armed, even though he was not supposed to have guns. According to Noah, Rain had taken a pistol from him. He did not want that weapon reported as stolen, but he still told officers to approach carefully. Then came the detail that made everything feel even more serious. Noah told officers that Amy and Rain referred to Josiah as the next Messiah. That single line changed the tone of the situation. What already sounded troubling suddenly felt unstable in a different way. Police also received information from another person in the area who claimed Rain and Josiah had been seen carrying a large diaper bag filled with pills. Officers attempted to reach Amy during the welfare check, but they were unable to make contact. Nothing was confirmed at that moment, but 3 days later, the situation escalated anyway. On April 11th, Rain and Josiah were arrested. Even then, the arrest did not come directly from the welfare check itself. It came from a completely different complaint, one that had been filed 2 weeks earlier by someone inside Josiah's own family. According to investigation reports, Josiah's uncle, Jason Lorton, contacted the Okanogan County Sheriff on March 27, 2025. He reported that Rain and Josiah had been on the property of a rental home he owned and that several items were missing. The list he gave was not small. It sounded extreme. He told police that $75,000 in cash was gone. Along with that, $85,000 in gold coins. There was also $8,000 worth of wine and champagne, a pistol valued at $2,500, a revolver worth $650, another pistol worth $450, and even a marijuana bong valued at $250. On top of that, he said the property had been damaged with broken glass and a damaged generator, which he estimated at another $5,000. Altogether, the total losses, including the damage, went beyond $176,000. Jason also told investigators that a neighbor had video footage showing Rain and Josiah at the property on the day of the alleged burglary. Police used that footage, along with other evidence, to move forward with the case. Then, on April 11th, both Rain and Josiah were taken into custody and booked into the Okanogan County Jail. The charges were serious. Rain was charged with first-degree burglary, first-degree malicious mischief, and second-degree criminal trespass. Josiah was charged with first-degree burglary and first-degree malicious mischief. They spent 3 nights in jail before appearing in court. On April 14th, a judge reviewed the situation and found there was enough probable cause for the cases to move forward. Both Rain and Josiah were released on their own recognizance. That meant they did not have to pay bail, but they were required to return for future court appearances. Both entered not guilty pleas. 9 days after the arrest, on Easter Sunday, April 20, 2025, Rain finally spoke publicly. She posted a message on Instagram. It was short, emotional, and built around scripture. From the beginning, the tone felt defensive. But one thing stood out immediately. She did not mention Josiah at all, even though he had been arrested alongside her just days earlier. Instead, she opened with a Bible verse and told her followers, who she often called her rainbows, not to judge. Then she shifted focus. She claimed people were believing lies from a former manager who, according to her, had stolen $43,000 from her and abused her. She did not name that person. She did not provide proof. And she did not address the specific allegations tied to the burglary case. The missing cash, the gold coins, the weapons, the damage. None of it appeared in her statement. She ended the post by saying the situation hurt her deeply and asked people to stay long enough to hear her side of the story. But that only divided reactions further. Some fans immediately supported her and told her to stay strong. Others asked direct questions. What actually happened? Why were she and her husband arrested? Why was there so little explanation when the case had already become public? Rain did not answer. Since then, her version of events has remained mostly unclear. Outside of her not guilty plea, there has been very little detail shared publicly from her side. Court records have not filled in the full picture either. The case is still active. The life that fell apart too fast. That silence matters even more when you look at how quickly everything in her life changed. Rain Brown's marriage to Josiah Lorton may have been the biggest turning point. It happened fast, and from the outside it looked intense from the very beginning. In December 2023, she first told fans she had a boyfriend. Then in January 2024, she shared more, saying they became fast friends and slowly fell deeply in love. She described it as natural, almost inevitable once it started. They met at work. Rain was a waitress, and Josiah, who was 33, was the head chef. Rain was 22. She told followers that one day she came to visit and never left. She said he showed her real, genuine love and kept showing her how beautiful life could be. Then on January 30, 2025, she announced they were married. The post was full of excitement, confirming it clearly and showing a photo of them in winter clothes with a snow-covered Washington mountain behind them. Less than 11 weeks later, both of them were in jail. That is what made the marriage feel different. It stopped looking like a romantic milestone and started feeling like the beginning of a collapse. According to Noah Brown's statement to police, Josiah had guns he was not allowed to have. According to welfare check details, Rain and Amy had been referring to him as the next Messiah. And according to the burglary report filed by Josiah's own uncle, the two of them had allegedly taken cash, gold, wine, and weapons worth well into 6 figures from a rental property. Fans of Alaskan Bush People had seen drama before, arguments, distance, and tension, but they had never seen a story like this end with arrests. Then before that situation could even settle, another twist arrived. In February 2026, about 10 months after Rain's arrest, and while her case was still active in Okanogan County Superior Court, Ami Brown made a new announcement. She posted a sonogram photo on Instagram with Rain's name visible. The caption was simple, baby's first pic. Then she shared the bigger message. Her daughter Rain was having a baby. Grandbaby number 11 was on the way. That changed everything again. Rain, still only 22, was about to become a mother. Josiah, 33, was about to become a father. At the same time, both of them were still dealing with an active criminal case. Rain was facing a mix of felony and misdemeanor charges, and Josiah had charges of his own. The reaction online split immediately. Some people offered congratulations. Some were worried about a child entering that situation. Others pointed back to Noah's earlier allegations and treated the pregnancy as another sign of a life spinning out of control. Even then, Rain did not come forward with a clear public statement about the pregnancy when the news broke. That silence made everything feel more uncertain. People had watched her grow up from the time she was 11 years old. Now they were being asked to hold several different versions of her at once. She was the child from the early seasons, the teenager who spoke about cyberbullying, the young woman who opened up about depression, then someone living with bipolar 1 disorder, then a wife, then a criminal defendant, then an expectant mother. Every version was real, but none of them fit together cleanly. In the background, the world that made her famous was fading. Alaskan Bush People aired its last original episode in December 2022, marking what became the end of season 14. There was no official cancellation, but no new season followed. After Discovery became part of Warner Bros. Discovery in April 2022, the future of the show became uncertain. Bear Brown told fans the pause was due to the network reorganizing, but the reality was more complicated. The show never recovered from Billy Brown's death. He was not just a cast member. He was the center of the story, the voice, the emotional anchor. Once he was gone, everything felt weaker. The rest of the family had to carry something that was never meant to exist without him. At the same time, the Malgon lawsuit was still hanging over the family. The wildfire in 2020 had already destroyed their home. Several siblings had moved away, and Rain herself had stepped back because of her mental health treatment. By the time she was arrested in April 2025, the show that built her life was already sitting in silence. That is what makes her story feel even stranger. At its peak, Alaskan Bush People was a major television success, pulling in around 1.5 to 2 million viewers per episode. The family's combined net worth was once estimated at $60 million. Billy Brown wrote or self-published more than 50 books during his life. Across 14 seasons, from 2014 to 2022, the show generated hundreds of millions in advertising revenue. And yet, despite all of that success, everything around her now feels uncertain. Sometimes the story we see on screen is only a small part of what's really happening behind it. Fame, family, success, none of it guarantees a stable life. And Rain's story shows how quickly everything can change when pressure, loss, and reality collide. The real question is not what happened, it's what comes next.